All right, let's get right into it. The Jeffrey Epstein scandal. It's a story we all think we know. It's been covered from every possible angle. But the source material for this explainer makes a pretty bold claim, that the story we were all told might just be the cover for a completely different story. One about technology, unchecked ambition, and a future that is arriving way faster than we realize.
So what the source does here is what it calls a forensic reconstruction. It moves past the headlines, past the criminal case that we all know, to look for the patterns hidden underneath. The argument is that the real story isn't just about the terrible crimes, but about a very specific, coordinated technological project that was hiding in plain sight.
And this really is the central question of the whole thing. What if the sheer intensity of the scandal, the way it just completely consumed all of our attention, actually served a different purpose? What if it created a massive blind spot, allowing a very particular technological agenda to accelerate, completely ungoverned and basically unseen?
So, first things first, let's look at the official story. The source treats the mainstream version of events like a scientific control group. It calls it the null hypothesis. It's the baseline story that we're going to test against the documented facts.
Okay, so the null hypothesis is pretty simple, right? Epstein was a rich guy who wanted to be part of the elite club. He used donations to buy his way in, and when he got caught, the system reacted pretty much how you'd expect. It's a straightforward story of ego, money, and crime. But the real question is, does the evidence actually back that up? And this is exactly where the official story starts to look a little shaky. I mean, if this was just about vanity, you'd expect his money to be spread all over the place, right? A museum wing here, an art grant there. But instead, the funding was heavily clustered in very specific niche tech fields. And after his first conviction, you'd think institutions would run for the hills. But his access and influence actually continued for another decade. These little details, these anomalies, they suggest the official story isn't the whole story.
So if the official story doesn't quite fit, where do we look? Well, the source material does what any good investigation does. It follows the money. That's the one trail that doesn't lie. Let's see where it leads. First up, Harvard University. The university's own reports show that Epstein directed at least $9.1 million their way. But here's the kicker. $6.5 million of that went to one specific and kind of obscure place, the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics. And that field's mathematical models, they are directly applicable to building artificial intelligence.
Then we have MIT. Fact-finding reports dug up by the source show over $7.5 million in Epstein-connected funds flowing into the famous Media Lab. And here, his role was even bigger. He wasn't just a donor, he was a facilitator, helping to route millions more from other huge names like Bill Gates and Leon Black.
And this quote from an internal MIT email just says it all. It shows you the incredible risk these institutions were willing to take. Jeffrey money needs to be anonymous. I mean, this wasn't just accepting a donation. This was an active effort to hide the money source. The source argues that's not how you treat some random vanity donor. That's how you act when you're trying to protect an asset you feel is absolutely essential.
So it's clear the money was being hidden. But the source argues the even bigger point is that it was being targeted with surgical precision. The funds weren't just scattered around. They were consistently aimed at a very specific and coherent set of technologies.
And all this evidence leads to the source's core idea for understanding Epstein's real function. It reframes him. He wasn't the main source of the money, but he was something much more important in a network. He was a routing node.
A routing node. What does that even mean? Well, think about it like a hub airport. It's the central point that connects all these other cities that would otherwise be separate. In this case, the source argues Epstein's job was to connect the dots, to bring together the brilliant theorists, the deep-pocketed funders, and the hands-on researchers from different fields who are all, knowingly or not, working on different pieces of the same giant puzzle.
To help us visualize this network, the source creates what it calls an analytic construct, Team Leela. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a formal group. It's just a way to show the network's focus. But just look at the fields of the people involved. The physics of information, consciousness as a computer, gene editing, uploading consciousness, AI, you see the pattern, right? They are all key components of a transhumanist worldview. You know, the idea that humanity can and should use technology to overcome its basic limitations, like aging, and maybe even death itself. And this technological focus lines up perfectly with the bizarre ideology that mainstream reporting, like in the New York Times, attributed to Epstein. Remember the stories about his plan to seed the human race with his DNA, his deep interest in freezing bodies? The source argues this wasn't just some weird eccentric talk. It was the ideological blueprint for the very network he was building.
Now, I get it. It's really easy to hear all of this and think it's pure science fiction. But the source's next point is absolutely crucial. The technologies this network was pushing forward are very, very real, and they're all starting to converge.
The source breaks this technical goal down into what it calls the consciousness continuity stack. Think of it like a recipe. You start with mathematical models for AI. Then, you use tools like CRISPR to optimize the human body, the hardware, to make it last longer. Next, you model emotions to make the AI more human. And finally, you create the direct link between the brain and the machine. Every single one of these pieces was being actively researched in the institutions Epstein was funding.
And if you're looking for a working prototype, well, the source points to a powerful one: Stephen Hawking's famous communication system. It started out as a simple speech synthesizer, but over time it evolved into something way more advanced, a truly sophisticated platform for modeling his cognitive processes.
By 2018, that system had achieved a stunning 97.3% predictive accuracy. The project lead at Intel, Lama Nachman, put it in really stark terms. The system learned his mind. Just let that sink in. This was no longer just a communication tool. The source argues it was a functioning, predictive model of a human consciousness.
Now look at this timeline, which the source presents as a truly provocative convergence of events. March 2018, Stephen Hawking passes away, right at the peak of his cognitive model's accuracy. Just 16 months later, Epstein is arrested. Then, 2 months after that, the entire leadership of the MIT Media Lab, a central hub for all this research, completely collapses. The scandal doesn't just happen at a random time. It erupts at the very moment a key piece of this technological puzzle is solved.
So, the big question is, why haven't we heard this story before? Why has all the focus been on the scandal? The source's final argument explains this with a really powerful concept it calls the asymmetry of disclosure. It's all about what we're shown versus what stays hidden. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got the sex scandal. It's high disclosure, it's emotionally gut-wrenching, and it was reported on endlessly. It creates what the source calls an attention singularity, like a black hole that sucks all the light and attention toward it. And on the other side, the Transhumanist network. Low disclosure, super technical, and fragmented across different universities. One story is easy to tell, the other is hard. So one story completely buries the other.
And this is the real-world consequence, the real danger. This asymmetry creates a massive governance vacuum. While the entire world is rightly focused on the horrifying scandal, the actual technological infrastructure, the stuff that could change our future, just keeps getting built in the shadows, with zero public debate or oversight.
The source concludes that this result, this total lack of oversight, wasn't just some random accident. It was the predictable outcome of how our modern media world works, where stories that trigger strong emotions will always drown out the ones that are complex and technical.
And so, the source material leaves us with this final, powerful question that is so much bigger than just this one story. If our collective attention is a finite resource, one that can be captured and aimed like a spotlight, what other crucial stories, what other emerging futures, are being built right now, in the dark, while we're all looking the other way?